Hello and welcome to the Story Shed. And today marks 3 months since I first did a story in the shed. And we're going to celebrate with a story by my friend Alan Tully. You may remember that he wrote a story called Emma the Mischief Fairy. And if you haven't seen it, then it's still on the old channel there. It's still on the timeline. As are many other stories. If you haven't caught up with them, that'd be great if you would have a look at them. Remember, you are all shareholders of the channel, not in terms of pounds and pence and all of that, but in terms of shares of joy. And if you could pass on that joy to other people, that would be fantastic. I would really love that. The story I'm going to read now is called Oscar, the Organised Fairy. Down at the bottom of a very special garden, hidden behind a thick bush, was a magical place called Fairy Town. Fairy Town was, of course, the home of the fairies. There were many fairies living in Fairy Town, all doing fairy jobs, like repairing people's shoes, taking children's teeth, and a whole host of other jobs, from cooking to toy making. Every fairy had a magical name, which told people what they were like and what was unique to them. One fairy was called Oscar, the Organised Fairy, and as his name suggests, was a very well organised fairy indeed. He had a beautiful, symmetrical white house, inside of which everything had its place and no mess could be seen. On the outside of the house, he had exactly 2 window boxes on each windowsill, with each box containing exactly 4 colourful flowers. His garden was immaculate, with each blade of grass being cut to exactly the same size, and no weeds were allowed to grow anywhere in his perfectly manicured flower beds. Oscar was proud of his house and the way it looked. Now, life was good for Oscar except for one thing. All the other fairies were not as organised as him. Everywhere he looked, Oscar saw only the messy and the disorganised. For a start, every fairy just painted their house whatever colour they felt like. Not the stylish white he had his house painted in. There were red houses, blue, green, and even a lilac-coloured house at the end of the street. The other houses' gardens were not organised like his was. Most of the lawns were overgrown. Most, if not all, the flower beds had weeds growing all over the place, and there wasn't a window box in sight. Oscar had asked all the fairies to look after their houses and gardens more, but they just laughed, and they said that they liked the way their houses and gardens looked. So one day, Oscar had had enough, and he thought, well, if these fairies don't care enough to look after their houses and gardens, then he would have to do something about it. So one night, Oscar put on what he called his nighttime ninja outfit. It was all black. Black shoes, black trousers, black jumper, all capped off with a black cap. He crept out of his house, silently pulling behind him a cart filled with all the tools he would need to turn the unruly street into an organised paradise. Oscar moved at amazing speed. He was a blur, moving from house to house. At each house, he would quickly spray paint the outside white, dig out all the weeds in the flower beds, and cut the lawn using his ultra-quiet lawnmower. When Oscar wanted something done, it got done. And in record time, just before the sun rose, he had finished. Oscar stood on a little hill at the bottom of the street to survey his masterpiece. The morning sun shone in the sky, lighting up the street that Oscar had just finished working on. Every house was white. Every flower bed had exactly the same number of flowers, and every lawn looked exactly the same. That was when Oscar realised his mistake. With all the houses looking the same, his house no longer stood out. It just looked ordinary. The whole street now just looked ordinary and boring. Before, the street had looked vibrant and distinctive. Now, nobody would look twice at the street because it had no personality or charm. Oscar started to panic. He didn't know what to do. People were just about to wake up and he didn't have time to change things back. The fairies of Fairytown started going about their daily business, and most couldn't believe what they were seeing. "What's happened to my lilac house?" said Annie, the arty fairy. "Your house," said Victor, the grocer fairy. "Look at my vegetable patch. There's only flowers in it." All the fairies now started flowing out into the street, not believing their eyes. The whole street looked exactly the same. Oscar, still standing on the little hill at the end of the street, could see the fairies looking bewildered and frustrated. He decided he had to do something. He couldn't just pretend he had nothing to do with the situation. He had to confess and hope that the others would understand. He put his fingers in his mouth and blew. The high-pitched whistle shot out into the early morning, making all the fairies turn to look at Oscar on the hill. Oscar took a deep breath and said, "My fellow fairies, I'm sorry, but I am the reasons why all your houses look the same." "What do you mean?" said the crowd. "Well, I painted all your houses and changed all your gardens," said Oscar. The crowd started to murmur, but Oscar continued before the crowd could say any more. "I just wanted the street to be more organised. I thought by making your houses all look like mine, then we'd have a better street. But I was wrong." Oscar hung his head in shame. "I realised that by making all the houses and gardens the same, that we'd lost what made our street special. I thought the different coloured houses were annoying, but they weren't. They gave our street something special and unique. I'm so sorry. I only realised my mistake at the end." The crowd of fairies was shocked. Some were angry, but most were perplexed at how Oscar had managed to change every house in the street without waking anybody up, and that he'd done it all in just a single night. They may not have agreed with Oscar's reasons, but most could admit it was an impressive feat. Oscar cleared his throat and said, "If you'll let me, I'll change all your houses back. I'll make them all look the way they were." Oscar looked out into the crowd pleadingly, hoping that his words would be enough. There was more murmuring in the crowd as the fairies tried to work out between themselves what they should do. Then Annie, the arty fairy, stepped forward from the crowd and said, "Well, Oscar, that is quite a story, and I take it from a painter what you have done tonight takes some doing. We accept your apology, Oscar. We're not happy about it, and I would give Victor a wide berth for a while, but overall we know you're sorry and didn't mean to cause trouble. And to be honest, some of us could have looked after our gardens and houses a bit better. I myself have been known to let my grass grow a little wild. We have decided that we will all work together with you to bring the personality back into the street." Oscar was so relieved and thanked everyone in the crowd for their understanding. Throughout the rest of the week, Oscar and the other fairies worked hard to change back the street the way it had been. Well, not completely, because some of Oscar's changes did make things look better. Things like the colourful flowers and window boxes stayed on most of the houses. Most of the fairies could admit a bit of organising was a good thing. And Oscar realised that being different and unique was something special that needed to be protected and not changed. In the end, even Oscar decided to add a bit of colour to his home, and he and Annie painted a big, colourful flower on the side of his house. From that point on, every year the fairies of Oscar's streets hold a street party to celebrate the special things about the place where they live. Of course, Oscar is the head of the planning committee. And that's the end. And I hope you enjoyed that story by my friend Alan, called Oscar the Organised Fairy. Alan is hopefully going to be writing more stories about more fairies, because we have certainly more names that are coming up all the time. We now have Victor, and we have Annie. Yes, I just read it and I can't remember. We have Annie the Arty Fairy, and also my favourite, Dave the Grumpy Fairy. So hopefully those stories will be coming soon, and you have something to look forward to. But in the meantime, take good care, look after yourselves, and bye for now. Bye bye.